Hey guys, welcome to this test stream of a project that I'm putting together. It's something that I've just sort of been, penning together over the past, I'd say, week, part-time. And it's honestly super scuffed, and there's still yeah, so this is super scuffed. It's still in its, well, I say this is the final draft, but realistically this is probably going to go through a couple more revisions before I finalize it, then put it together as part of the series on YouTube. But yeah, this is, technically it's part 1, but it is the second video of the series, where I cover, basics history of YouTube, VTubers in general, so you can have context for where it came from, why it is what it is, what examples of how people have succeeded in this industry, and how potentially you could get some sort of a formula together so that you yourself could see yourself in this role. This isn't going to be the technical part of it, that's going to be a couple of streams later, but this is just history. This is you understanding, VTubing as through a historical lens. Now, just to set your expectations, I'm not going to be covering absolutely every single little minute detail of VTubing, and the reason for that is it is quite monolithic. VTubing as an industry, as something that exists as it exists now, has a lot of history, has a lot of nuance, has a lot of different stages, VTubers, things that they've done, things that they haven't done, things that they shouldn't have done. And to go through it all was quite a monolithic endeavor in itself. Just trying to see how everything, fit together chronologically, made me look like a used DeLorean from Back to the Future. And once I was done just with the history side of things alone, and we're talking pre-Kazuna AI, I ended up looking like this guy. I am not joking, that was me. So, I'm not going to be covering everything. This is going to be the history of VTubing in very broad strokes. So if you see something, if you are aware of a part of VTubing, or you've seen something in the past and wondered why it hasn't been covered, this is why. This video exists, or the stream, as it were, exists just to give you history in broad strokes. Now, you might be saying, joke's on you, I'm into history. I want to see all of the everything. I want to know the nuances, the everything, the microscopic details. And if that is who you are, if that is what you're interested in, I'll take notes. And maybe if I reach affiliate by mid next year, I'll revisit this and do a very, 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 very detailed video on just the history side of things alone, because, like I said, there is a lot that I'm not going to cover, because the goal is broad, the goal is concise, and the goal is just giving you enough to know the past, the present, and how you can fit into the future. So to that end, we're going to be sticking to three main anchors, three main things that I will anchor this video around in no particular order with no particular title. So one of them is, what is VTubing? Another one is, why is VTubing? And the third one is, where did it come from? So basically the KISS principle, keep it super simple, except in your opinion you'll probably see something in this video that makes you think this is not super simple, which is fine. So, where did it come from? Well, to start we have to go back to 1935, Korea. This is, in Asia at least, where the first female vocal group formed. Now, strictly speaking, they weren't idols, which will become relevant later on, but they set the groundwork for a lot of the K-pop bands that we're familiar with today. Now, the reason this is important is because a lot of what we see in VTubing, a lot of what we see with the, your Hololives, your VShoujos, your any major VTubing company pretty much copies the format of what idol groups in the Asias, your Japans, your Koreas, your Indonesias, VTubing agencies pretty much copy that formula because it works really, really, really well for getting fans, getting their attention, and hopefully generating profit. Now, this period went really well for South Korea, but there is a country more relevant to this conversation, Japan. Now, around 1960 Japan is when their idol industry started, which is what we're going to be focusing more on, because the specifics of how they set up that industry, at least locally to Japan, and the standards, the way you apply, the way you fail, the way you don't go through the industry, some things you're expected to do, to not do, are all nuances that are part of the modern VTubing formula in one way or another. Now, here is a couple of those idol groups. Some of them you may have seen before, some of you may not have. And again, much like the Korean idol groups, much like their industry, it's almost copy-paste. Again, there are specifics to the Japanese culture that have influenced how Japan runs the idol industry, but it's more or less a one-for-one. Now, how does one get into an idol group? Well, there are a couple of ways that you can do that. One of the ways you can do it is that you can do what's called a group interview. This is where you and a bunch of other prospective idols will go into a room with a panel of people from a particular talent agency, and you will perform to the best of your abilities to convince them that you are, worth their time to take on as a talent. A good model to get your head around how that works is if you've ever seen American Idol. Very similar, except kind of not at all. The process is very much the same, where you enter on stage, you introduce yourself, you perform, and then later on you are judged against the other candidates. Another way that you can do it is what's called a video interview. This is where you will pretty much do the same thing that you would do as a group interview, except you're recording that and sending it through as a file to your prospective idol agency. Again, this is a slightly more complex version because there is less eye contact, there is less interaction between you and the agency that you're applying for. So it's pretty much a case of you have to get it right in the one video, otherwise you're screwed. Another less common way is that you can apply to an agency much like you would any other company. So you can apply to them, you can have a conversation, maybe there'll be a performance, maybe there won't be a performance, but it's very much your typical job application. And the fourth most common way is you'll be walking down the street in your Tokyo's, your wherever it may be in Japan, and you'll just get stopped on the street and asked if you want to be an idol. All of these ways will, in one way or another, get you into the Japanese, idol scene. Now, when you look at it as a whole, when you try to analyze, what is the content loop, how are they producing content, what does they look like as an idol, in very broad strokes, this is what it looks like. Pretty much you are one of many idols in a group. You then perform on stage, you act in movies, you dance or even model, and where you actually make money, because typically idols aren't paid for the actual performance itself, is the after show where you interact with your fans, you print photos, you make signatures. This is where idols typically make their money, and then you will repeat that however many times you're required to a week. Now, as for how each individual talent will look, or what they'll be styled like, it will vary from agency to agency, but the general rule of thumb is girls will have a more cute styling to it, a more pure styling, and boys will be more serious, more cool, more, businessy or rock-centric. It again, does depend on the agency, does depend on the individual stylist, does depend on if someone is graduated or not. Now, as for the actual life part of it, the work-life balance as an idol is generally not that great. You have many idols who have a day job, study, and then they perform at night, and the toll that this takes on an individual is actually quite severe. In fact, it's very, very, very common for an idol to quit after a year. And those who have researched the Japanese idol group, or the idol scene, I should say, yes, there is more yabai, more serious, there is a lot of concerning things that happen as a result of that, which I can assure you, if you've heard the rumors, it's nowhere near as severe as you think, but are not going to be covered as part of this, because this is a more trying to give you history, trying to give you hope that you can be a VTuber, if that is your interest. So, it is real, but it's not something we're going to focus on. Now, if you've made it this far, you've probably been asking the question, why the hell am I going over Japanese idol scene? I thought this was the history of VTubing. Idols have nothing to do with VTubing. That doesn't make any sense, you goddamn muppet of a human being. Well, that's because one of the things that idols get wrong, and one of the things that VTubing get wrong, is, work-life balance. So you need to be aware of how that's happened historically, and what the effects have been and are in the Japanese idol scene, so that you coming into this industry don't make those mistakes. So, and then there are a lot of other things as well, such as things that you will do as an accessory to VTubing, who you'll interact with, content that you'll shoot, and a lot of other more adult things as well that you'll do to support your VTubing thing. And there will also be times that you'll be forced into it, there will also be things that you'll be told to that you don't want to, and the cause and effect of these things has already happened in the past. So to better prepare yourself as a VTuber, you need to learn for the future by studying from yesterday, so that you don't end up, unaliving your prospective or potential VTubing career or VTubing hobby, because a lot of people do this as a hobby, they don't do it as a way to make money, which both schools are equally as valid as each other. Now, I want you to pay attention to this content loop. This content loop right here is going to be repeated later on. It is going to come up again as the same thing, but different, and you'll understand why later on if you haven't already figured it out. Because, believe it or not, you have seen this content loop before, just not in this exact way. Now, enough of that, it's weeb time. Back in 2004, Yamaha released a program called Vocaloid. It's effectively an advanced version of TTS, but we're not particularly worried about that. What we're focusing on is version 2, which was released in around 2007. Around that same time, anime was also getting popular. Now, this is a show that I watch and I quite like, but there are probably other examples you can think of back in the day if you were watching anime at that time. Now, Krypton Media came across that. They came across Vocaloid and thought, I can make some money off of this. So they came up with this. Now, Hatsune Miku is probably someone that you've seen before, and is not, again, not a virtual idol, much in the same way that other people have been idols before, but, you know, she's still Pog, nor is she the first virtual idol. She's just a mascot for a sound bank that Krypton Future Media made for the Vocaloid 2 program. If she were a real person, however, everything that she's done up until this point, depending on which source you go to, would have been an approximate, you know, net worth of around $120.28 million US. And the context for that is, to date, she's only been, well, she or it has only been active for roughly six and a half years. And all her animation was done in a program called Miku Miku Dance. Now, what this did to the traditions of the idol scene, and again, not the first person or example of this, but it pretty much further cemented the idea that an idol could be anchored to a character and its voice actor and not a real person. And the one thing you need to be aware of when it comes to the connection between the traditional idol scene and VTubing as we know it is this thing right here. All her animation was done in Miku Miku Dance. And to a point you could argue that another connection that is relevant is her massive popularity, which is true. But this really isn't going to become relevant until about 2016. So we're going to jump forward a couple of years and look at Twitch. Now, Twitch at this point in time was being overrun by streamers, and in response to that, the quote-unquote market of streamers became oversaturated. So this really wasn't good for people who were wanting to stand out, who were wanting to be streamers and get noticed and make it, you know, on Twitch doing whatever gameplay that they were trying to put out to the world. But Hatsune Miku and the other Vocaloid talents that came across since that time that she came out were getting popular. And anime was also getting popular. Really, really popular. So, Krypton Media wanted to get into Twitch. They wanted to get into the idol scene. They wanted to make use of Miku Miku Dance. And they had a plan, but they knew the market was oversaturated and it probably wasn't a good idea. So their response to that thought process was, how about I do anyway? Whoops. How about I do anyway? And comes Kazuna AI. Now, Kazuna AI is largely respected as the mother of VTubing as we know it today. She utilized Miku Miku Dance and H5, which was very, very early motion capture for PC. She did a lot of the same stuff as Hatsune Miku, but she also was, you know, a cute idol that played video games, and this allowed her to stand out, in combination with the fact that she had a lot of anime aesthetics that played into how her model was created and put together. Now, remember how I said this content loop would come up again? Well, one of the things that she did that set some of the very, very early standards for VTubing was she took this content loop and threw it in the bin and replaced it with this. So as opposed to being an idol that only ever interacted with her fans after she performed, she was an idol performing, playing video games, singing, dancing, etc., while interacting with fans, uploaded this to YouTube to interact with yet more fans, and then repeated that process. And this standard, even today, is still being followed in one form or another. Because as opposed to just having YouTube, we now have TikTok, we now have Instagram, we now have, some people still use Tumblr, but the idea is the same. You perform on your preferred platform, you then upload that performance in part or in full to other platforms, interact with more fans, and then you repeat that process. And then a bunch of other agencies came along and asked the question, what if we do, but better? So, around 2020, Project Melody came along, and I know, and you know, what Project Melody is well known for, but it is largely agreed that if Chat had not bullied her into playing video games, she would not have met Gunrun, which would not have started Vshoujo, which would not have amplified a completely new standard of how VTubers are expected to conduct themselves, because a lot of what I've been talking about in terms of the content loop does tend to restrict talents into being in a particular box, acting a certain way, and being, you know, a very specific character based on what the marketing and business needs of a agency is. Vshoujo, at least for the most part that I've been able to confirm without having access to, you know, their contracts and how they're structured, really doesn't care about that. What they're focused more on, at least as a company, is the individual and who they are pre-Vshoujo and how they can, you know, create a copacetic relationship in terms of how they can help promote them, support them through technology and marketing and different means, and help them grow as individuals rather than someone who has to perform inside of a box. And they do very, very, very well. And, you know, she went from just doing blank, which we all know what blank is, to playing video games, and then that led to collaborating with other people. And she also now has restarted her old Ludecast podcast, which is doing actually pretty good, considering that it's just a relaunch of a project that she put on indefinite hiatus. Now, if at this point you are still wanting to get into VTubing, if it is still something that you've gone, nope, I don't need to watch the rest of the video, this is something that I've confirmed wanted to do, I want you to pause the video. I want you to take pause even during the stream, and I want you to read this. This is an excerpt that I found from a interview that she did with Crunchyroll. And I think if there is no other part of the stream or this video that you find that is of value, I hope that this is just that one little nugget that you can take away, because it's an important thing to keep in mind that you should be consciously aware of every single day that you stream, every single day that you put yourself out there. And it's something that I struggle with as well as a content creator, but again, I just thought it was kind of neat that she provided this perspective. Okay, moving on. So, another example of VTubers that are out there that maybe have a different background, that came from different beginnings, was, I can think of no greater example of Takahata 101. Now, Takahata got his start performing in Team 4-Star, doing Dragon Ball Z Abridged and Hellsing Abridged, and he made the jump into VTubing in about 2020. Now, he's mostly known for the Weary 101, which is a slow roast of a talk show where he collabs with other VTubers, pretty much just shooting the shit for a couple of hours. He also plays video games, does skits, has been known to sing very, very, very rarely, and the turning into a puppy thing is one of many long-running gags that he has, where a particular collaborator that he routinely streams with, although not so much because unfortunately that person is having issues in her personal life, did a thing where she turned him into a puppy on stream, and that's just sort of been like a running gag where someone will come in and say, hey, I heard that there's a puppy in the bar, I want to see the puppy, and then they'll sort of surreptitiously sort of egg him into putting back on that particular costume, and it's quite neat. And if you see that and watch videos of it, you'll see that it's just another way that you can collaborate, make content, work with people, and just sort of create a rather unique experience. Now, another VTuber that I follow quite regularly is Miss Jackie. She's been streaming since roughly 2020. She's very, very, very talented artist. I was originally going to show as a background one of the drawings that she did. Unfortunately, it really didn't aesthetically work for me. But, you know, I can assure you, if you look her up on Instagram, if you look her up on Twitter, you'll see examples of her art, and it's just chef's kiss. Now, she mainly plays video games. She does sometimes doodle on stream, but one thing that she also does is she also plays console games as well. So typically, up until this point, if you were a VTuber, you'd mainly play games, you know, on your computer. But also, we now see people who are VTubers who are playing console games as well, where they'll play the console and run it through a capture card like an Elgato unit or a TV tuner if you're into really, really, really old school hardware or software. And another thing that she did, which I thought was quite neat, in about 2022, she introduced ChatCat. Now, ChatCat is where she allowed her fans to interact with her by sending TTS messages through a avatar on screen. And it actually got quite popular. In fact, there's a whole, if you go on her Discord, you'll see there's like, you know, whole people that know this lore that is behind this character, and it's sort of, at this point, taken on its own life, where she plays the role of Miss Jackie, and then Chat plays the role of ChatCat, and it's this really weird, copacetic relationship where anyone who comes into the stream who uses TTS sort of knows how to play the game, knows how to quote-unquote act as ChatCat, and there's sort of like this unofficial rule of, like, this is the way to communicate as ChatCat, these are the things that ChatCat would typically say, and it's just a very unique and special interaction between her and her community that just happened organically, and I think that's something to take note of. Another VTuber that I'm very, very, very fond of is Iron Mouse. Now, when I was thinking about becoming a VTuber, there's like a lot of research I did through particular VTubers who, unfortunately, again, due to the briefness and broadness of this presentation and what I'm trying to achieve, could not be included, that resulted in me sort of half considering it. And then there were other people like Red, like Spike, like all of the people who I interact with on Haruka's Discord, who were in one way or another influential in me, you know, sort of considering it. But Iron Mouse particularly is the one that sort of is the straw that broke the camel's back. And the reason for that is she has a very particular condition where everything in her day-to-day life is a struggle for her. From getting up, to eating food, to playing video games, to talking, to walking, it is doable, but also has a litany of challenges. And that's not something I can cover in this video, but, you know, it's pretty much her life said no to that living and VTubing in general, and she said, how about I do anyway? And every time she streams, it's a struggle for her because she has to balance her medical issues, she has to balance her day-to-day life. She'll have to deal with the very real fact that she could be halfway through a stream and due to her issues will have to cancel that stream for her own health. And she just continues going on and on and on and on. And as a laborer, as someone who labors for a living, as someone who struggles, who works with his hands, I can identify very closely with struggling to achieve a goal. And that in itself would be enough, but it was when she explained all of that in an outro of hers and said anyone can become a VTuber, that is what pushed me to try to make a stab, to make an attempt in this industry. And, you know, again, she's known by her fans as a gremlin, and her talents are she plays video games, she collabs with other VTubers, much like all other VTubers, and again, due to health reasons, she doesn't do it a lot, but she is very well known for her talent as a singer. And if you ever get to be a part of a stream where she does, you know, risk it for a biscuit and sing, please stick around, because I can assure you, at least through secondhand experience, it is a hoot and a half. Now, up until this point, all of the VTubers, and for the most part at least, apart from Takahata 101, have been 3D. But the question has to be asked, does a VTuber have to be 3D? Traditionally, the answer would have been yes, because the origins of VTubing, as we've discussed with Kazuna AI, were very much ones that utilized 3D software, and that will stand for many, many years. But as the industry has evolved going forward, the answer has actually become no. You do not need to be a 3D. You do not need to have a 3D avatar, I should say, to be a VTuber. It is not a requirement. It's not something you have to do. And there's a bunch of software out there, such as Live 2D, such as Kazuna AI. No, not Kazuna AI. Goddamn. She's infecting my brain. Oh no. There's a bunch of software like out there, such as Live 2D and Vtuber, which is a software that I use quite frequently, that will allow you to, as opposed to commissioning someone to do a 3D avatar, you just commission someone to make 4 images of eyes open, mouth open, mouth closed, eyes closed, mouth open, eyes closed, mouth closed, and you just have that cycle through the software on its own settings. And it's ridiculously lightweight, anyone can run it, and it's something I'd recommend to you if you're just wanting to test the waters to see if it's something that you want to do. Getting art commissioned in itself, again, is not cheap, and not something that you have to do. Like, one of the first avatars that I used was just a meme image of, like, you know, that, if you've ever seen the meme Wojak, it was pretty much just that guy with those 4 images that I used for a couple months before I invested into buying, you know, an avatar, because with investing into avatars, it is getting more and more and more and more and more expensive going forward. So you want to be mindful of that, because when it comes to VTubing, and this is something that we'll cover in later videos, it is not something that can be done, and it is something that you can manage your money around. But the point where you start to make money, much like your Iron Mouses, your Chibidokis, your Cabals, your Takahata 101s, that point does take a lot of time. If you've ever heard of people going through the Twitch verification process, where you go from affiliate to partnership, that process in itself can take like many, many years before you reach that process, because there are a number of stats that you have to reach on Twitch alone, and even if you reach those stats, it's not guaranteed that they'll even let you go to affiliate or partnership. So you could say reach affiliate, the requirements for affiliate in like a couple months, but that's not necessarily meaning that they'll allow you to enter it. There have been a couple of examples of people who've tried to reach affiliate and got rejected for undisclosed reasons, much in the same way that people have met the requirements for partnership and got rejected for undisclosed reasons. So you need to be aware of that. It is expensive, so do it if it's within your budget, but don't do it if it's going to put you out, because that would make you not a particularly savvy individual. Yeah. So, let's look at a couple of examples of people who are 2D VTubers. Boom, Nero-sama. Haha! Quite a popular AI VTuber. Now, most people seem to think that she debuted in recent years. This isn't actually true. She debuted as early as 2020. She is an AI that was originally developed to create, play and beat rhythm games, but has, evolved to play other games as well. Now, her programming, even at this stage, even though she's now almost a year into running full time, is still very, very scuffed. And this has been exemplified by her or it getting banned because chat convinced her into denying the Holocaust. Now, again, this isn't a fault of the programming itself. Well, I guess you could say it is a fault of the program itself, because if you've ever heard of Tay AI way back when AI as it's been built learns off of people, and there are very easy ways of learning how AI works by interacting with it, and if you type a very particular thing in a very particular way, that AI will recognize that pattern, so if it's prompted for that particular thing again, it will then repeat that because it's learned that that's the accepted response, which is how it got tricked into denying the Holocaust. Another example is the Sky Tea, which I will... You didn't see that. You didn't see that at all. Yep, the Sky Tea. That is what you saw. You saw nothing. Hugh. So the Sky Tea, again, is another artist who mainly plays games, has been known to doodle, and what makes her stand out from Miss Jackie, which is that title that you didn't see before because I am a clever person and I totally edited this thing correctly, is she was constantly told by her community that her plushie form looked like a cow. Now, another artist that you'll see is Vash the Rat, but we'll focus on her in a little bit. Sky T. See, this is a reason. This is why I called it, the super scuffed version, because I knew this was going to happen. God damn it. I'm not a very clever person, am I? So the Sky T debuted as early as 2020, and one of the things that she did is she also has a TTS avatar, which has taken on its own unique form, its own unique lore, and it's the same situation with Miss Jackie, where everyone sort of understands the unofficial rules of this is how this character is expected to be portrayed, and the interaction between streamer and community is very much the same, but also very different. Another 2D streamer that I interact with quite regularly is Vast the Rat. Now, Vast the Rat has streamed as early as 2018, and pretty much mainly plays Splatoon, and is really into the competitive side. Also really attached to her community as well, and that's exemplified, but every time she streams she has quite a sizable number of people interacting with her. But just recently she has also started to break out into other games as well, and she's another streamer that I have respect for, because how to put this? All throughout streaming, all throughout my attempts at fumbling my way through how to figure this thing out, there have been people who I've interacted with, again, Spike, Red, everyone from Hoka's server, Vasthera included, who are aware of who I am and what I'm trying to do, and have in their own way helped me. And that's another way that you can succeed as a Vtuber, by finding people in the community who identify with the voodoo that you do and will want to help you grow, and that's another way that you can succeed, because like many things, you can't really make it as an island alone. To grow, you internally by yourself, you can grow to a certain point, but there will come a point where you will have to reach out to other people and grow a community, not exclusive of your chat group, but also with other streamers who have maybe succeeded before you have, who you could potentially collaborate with, or who are very good with technology and can help you with certain things, such as how to set up TTS, how to do plugins with OBS, what are good times to stream, what games you should be focusing on, how you should do social media. Having those connections is just as valuable, if not more, than, you know, getting certain words right, doing titles incorrectly, because these are things that you can fix, but having that external input is something that you just really can't get any other way. Now, how does one get into a Vtuber agency? That is actually quite an interesting question. And it's not really one, unfortunately, that I can answer, because like I said, I don't have access to the internal documentation of Vtuber agencies, and even in the community to this day, now that it's been operating for quite a number of years, has not been able to confirm a lot about Vtuber agencies and how they run. What we do know is some talents that exist in VTubing are voice actors that have applied. However, through this process, they generally get assigned a new character, and whatever characters they've had before get thrown in the bin. Others are talents that got scouted, so you'll see this more commonly with agencies like Vtuber. But there is really no common way to get into an agency, much like there is a common way to get into an idol group. Now, you might be asking the question, well, do I need to be part of a VTuber agency to be a VTuber? No, you don't. In fact, it's very, very, very common for there to be people who are part of an agency, but also equally as common for individuals to exist in the crowd and succeed. And this all really depends on what you're trying to do. But what it boils down to at the end of the day is, if you have a talent, a skill, play games, and are passionate about the voodoo that you do, you can become a VTuber. And I think that is going to help you a lot with the decisions that you make further down the track, with if this is something that you want to do, if this is something that you want to continue with, what choices you'll make in terms of games that you'll play, hardware that you'll buy. And again, these are things that we'll touch on further down the track in future streams or videos. And at this point, I really have to say thanks for watching. It was actually quite a lot of fun creating this project, putting it out into the world, and risking it for a biscuit, but also just figuring out just how in-depth VTubing can get, and other ways that VTubers have put together their stream and succeeded in their own way. Again, much like I said in the earlier on video, if you would like to know more about VTubing, its history, if there's something specific that you'd like me to focus in on, do feel free to mention that or talk to me about it. And if you'd like to, yeet your ideas at me, you can type in !links. I'm active on Twitter, TikTok, YouTube, Discord, and right here at home on Twitch. And if you feel like being especially generous and helping me, fund these future projects, you can type in !donate. Again, this is not compulsory. It's not something that you have to do. It's not something that I'm telling you to do. But every little bit does help, because I am a person alone, but having extra funds will allow me to do things differently. For example, I could potentially fund, say, like a fully 3D model, or I could build a big computer so I could collaborate with people on more higher spec games. But again, I'm not asking you to do this. Right now, I'm happy with what I've got. I'm happy with the plans that I'm making going forward, and I have literal months on months on months of content. So again, not a requirement, but if you did decide to donate, it would very much be appreciated. And this presentation. I hope to see you again on the next stream. I'm not sure when I'll be streaming next, because due to analytics being what they are, I am going to take a break. I am going to step back from my regular streaming schedule, just so I can sort of refocus a little bit. But when I does get back to normal, I will let you know, and I'll probably get back into my old schedule. This weekend, I am looking into doing like another stream. That stream is going to be based on a poll that I ran, where I will be deciding between two games that will enter onto the roster. I I'm still trying to coordinate that as to how it will work, but it will be live on Twitch as early as Friday, so stay tuned. And I very much hope to see you on the next stream. Bye bye for now.